In the video preceding this one, I asserted that resources should be diverted to releasing a finished version of the Overwatch story as soon as possible. I do mean as a movie. The story in Overwatch has this rebellion built into it that isn't being seen by anyone because it's in video game form, and therefore everyone can dismiss it as being a video game, which um, is normal for our time. It's also very careful with its use of proper nouns. The villains in Overwatch are apparently a bunch of robots, and it kind of seems distant from us in that way. It's not so distant from us, though. It's supposed to happen in countries that use proper nouns that correspond to the proper nouns we use in our time for countries. Korea and England and Germany and the United States. It's set 50 to 60 years in the future, which is not that far away from us. So it's nothing like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings. It might seem like the Harry Potter world because Harry Potter is similarly set in our world. The characters in Overwatch, namely the heroes, are kind of special because they're not like kids or teenagers as they are in Harry Potter. So we can kind of treat the characters in Overwatch as our equals, assuming we're young adults. And if you're in school, you can look up to them easily. Even though the characters in Overwatch are adults, the focus on romance in Overwatch is close to non existent. Tracer has a girlfriend, but that's it doesn't really have much appearance in the story. It doesn't add to what makes Tracer remarkable as a role model. It's not why we are interested in her. She's a leader uh, in a different way from Winston. She's the title character, and she's the one who, in the opening cinematic, tells the young boys that they can be heroes too. Which is very unusual because I think we're supposed to take it that these guys are going to be heroes by playing Overwatch, but she thinks that's fine. To her, that's what constitutes being heroic. Yeah, the older brother in the opening cinematic helps with Doomfist, but why doesn't she tell him to leave it to the experts? Why does she allow him to help and not be scolded for interfering? She could say thank you, but to tell them that the world could always use more heroes comes out of left field. And those guys appear to not have girlfriends either, like many of the characters in Overwatch. And obviously, some of them would have boyfriends, but we barely hear about that. I know that there is perhaps some romance between Mercy and Genji, but at the least, that doesn't really seem what's important to them on the Overwatch team. Well, this is again in contrast to the characters in Harry Potter because there's romance all over the place in that franchise. And it's distracting because in Overwatch, what you learn is that you can be heroic even if you don't have a girlfriend or a wife. But it's harder to make that assertion in Harry Potter because there's all this momentum in the books that is devoted to sexual tension or if not romance. Uh, Biological family is really important in those novels. The lore of the Harry Potter novels is really extravagant in its use of family. In Overwatch, the family looks um, a lot different. Farah and her mom are family, but it's such a focal point of a family element. It's nothing like the Lestrange family or the Potter family, where there is generational feuds happening, and of course there are the Weasleys, which have to have such a big hoopla happening in their home. Their home is like a whole location of the books, and we have to listen to their brothers making wisecracks all the time, and one of them dies, and we keep on being shown all these biological family movements, these struggles of families to be good wizards or possibly add hidden skeletons in the way of bad wizards in their family, like Bellatrix. Well, in Overwatch, what instead comes to the fore is this idea of friendship. Overwatch doesn't really explicitly talk about friendship like the Harry Potter novels. Well, I haven't read the novels other than what other people have talked about it in YouTube videos, but certainly in the movies, there's a lot of lip service put out there for the sake of friendship. But the characters in Harry Potter are friends because they're in school And so, what other friendships matter? When you're an adult and you go into the workforce, or you go to a bar with your friends, it's you're grinding against other adults without being forced to be there, that creates adult friendship. It's when you have to pay your bills that you start to really measure how far you're going to go to have arguments with friends or take out your insecurities on them. If you look at Tracer and Winston, there's a really tremendous friendship there, and it's true that they can't really be romantic with one another, setting aside the fact that Tracer is gay. We wouldn't have it. Well, I mean, not that he's going to change, but while Winston is in the form of an ape, for Winston to talk, though, makes it so that he's much more her friend than how we mean when we say we're used to say that a dog is a man's best friend, because of course no dog talks to his owner. So when Winston issues the recall of the Overwatch team in the recall cinematic, and Tracer says that it's been too long, it's that work colleague kind of friendship. Even though the heroes are very remarkable, their abilities are not. Their abilities are almost more like vocations. And this is an obvious contrast to the heroes in something like the MCU, where the heroes are preposterously powerful. Even with uh, the Guardian of the Galaxy characters, there is at least that remoteness to them. It's that remoteness that comes in a lot of sci-fi made in the United States, where unlike Winston, the characters are really concerned about other planets and traveling from planet to planet. There's no sense of home the way there is as we see in Winston. Even though there are all these things happening on the moon, every everyone in Overwatch is concerned about the welfare of the planet. We get a lot of patriotism shown by every character respectively of their country. We've certainly seen that in the cinematic for Diva. Right? So this is particularly special to me when compared to something like the Guardian of the Galaxies franchise. Because if things aren't dystopian beyond repair here in American produced sci fi, then the characters in the fictional work are usually so bored with the United States that they spend a bunch of time in outer space traveling from planet to planet, or they never create something like the United States. So as soon as we get into sci fi, we start to discard the pride in one's homeland and the effort to try to fix your world so that you want to stay there. And you don't worry about birth rates or death rates. You're happy with your neighborhood and with what you see around you. That's what the Overwatch team members want to do. They want to make their homelands nice homelands. They don't want to go off into outer space and explore things. That's the patriotism in the Overwatch characters. That's the friendship in the Overwatch characters. That's the closeness we see to them because their special abilities are not that much further than their vocations. They have taken their vocations to this level that is top of their field, and they're not much farther than that. And sci-fi fills in the blanks, as is the case with Genji's cyborg container. It's really special that he and Hanzo. I don't care much about the short with he and Hanzo, but to have a couple of Japanese characters that speak Japanese and that can talk to American characters, presumably they. I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw it. Yeah, they want to defend and protect their home as much as Winston wants to protect his. And we can be all the more excited because they're from Japan. Japan is special to plenty of us in the West. We look at it as having a high standard of living. It's different from Russia. Um, we, we, we didn't have a Cold War with Japan, and there was no great schism in the Catholic Church that made the unorthodox church as it did in the area we now regard as Russia. So Japan is this really remarkable country. And we can have characters in it that care about it. In the theatrical trailer, Genji says, "We are harmony." He uses the pronoun we, but he's also in the foreground of what to me looks like Mount Fiji, so I presume it is. So he's able to use that pronoun but still be depicted as a guardian of his country. I'm American, so the United States is very special to me. That's my homeland. I do like that even though there are international characters in Overwatch, the creation is an American one. And I'm fine with the fact that it's an English person that is the spokesperson for the product. I kind of like that because that country is our ancestor in a certain way. Our meaning American or America in this case. It's weird to tell young people that they can be heroes without worrying about having a family, a biological family. In the US, the standby so called value that we hurl at everyone, regardless of their age, is that to have a family is what it takes to be an interesting person. This is supposed to be the thing that towers above anything else in terms of importance. In Overwatch, because the characters are friends with each other, and because we mostly don't care about their families, we can see this possibility that a young person who spends a lot of their time playing video games in the United States, for example, can still take pride in being well behaved or pride in something, even without having to go on Tinder or I mean, look at if you look at the bad things that have happened to characters in Blizzard games over the years, but let's focus on Overwatch. They're not really victims of sexual molestation or um, being pressured as a woman into being uh, sexually promiscuous in exchange for more pay at work. The Blizzard devs are really innovative. They come up with things like May, for example, who was simply doing her job and went through hardship because she was frozen for 10 years and her teammates did not come out of the hibernation mechanism. And so that was really hard for her. But that's her hardship. It doesn't really have anything to do with other hardships that could have befallen her, and that might seem like they're the hardships with which we should be concerned in our era. So Overwatch manages to make its heroes stand out and in turn allow its Overwatch players to feel good about themselves even though they might be virgins. And the glaring exception to this is the relationship that Farah has with her mother, Anna. But that family doesn't overwhelm the disposition of the Overwatch team at all. So it says that your family is important, but look at all these other things that are important too. So a young person can look at Overwatch and then start to really ask themselves, what are the heroic things that I can do other than having the courage to ask a girl out or uh, look fetching for some guy. As I've said, this is not really what we teach young people. We teach them that the family so-called values are the important ones. And that doesn't create any mystery for them, such that they have to wonder what else they can do to be a good friend and be a good citizen. Thus, Overwatch is leading a rebellion for its community in that way. It's kind of two things happening at the same time. On the one hand, it's uh, putting the goal of having a family side by side with what else it could mean to be a hero. And it's also saying that you don't have to be dating someone to pursue those ideals that can make you heroic should you embody them. It's very grassroots in terms of where your motivation for moral goodness should come in this way. Um, this goes back to there not being issues, for example, about um, its female characters not being bullied into accepting lower pay than men. There's not really a democracy in Overwatch with a system of checks and balances in its government and with a really unpopular person in the executive branch, and yet the characters are still supposed to be heroic. There's not stories running in the Overwatch depiction of news programs that are concerned with um, illegal immigration. And yet again, the heroes are still supposed to be representing determination, hope, courage. So Overwatch is very much shouting at the Overwatch community that you can do a lot of good in your home and among your friends without necessarily having to do sociological research or give to charity. The Overwatch people don't worry about charity. I know there was a pink mercy skin, but that's not really a part of the Overwatch lore. It's like Mercy decided to do that, and sure, players can do that, but that's not really the end of the Overwatch team. And they don't form their friendships around events like Breast Cancer Awareness Month. These small things that you're supposed to be doing, uh, they're reminiscent of what we see in the Hobbits and the Shire. Uh, the Hobbits were very much praised in the Lord of the Rings, especially at the end. We see this again in the Hobbit, and yeah, I mean they do courageous things in battle, but the Shire is supposed to be a nice thing in and of itself. I won't get into this too much, but it hits harder in Overwatch. It Overwatch. The point is driven harder because it's as if the world doesn't have anything but hobbits in it in the world of Overwatch. Everyone is mostly a normal person, and that ideal of treating your neighbors well is implied when you have a bunch of Overwatch characters that are cooperating with each other for the sake of their world. Without being cornered as the hobbits are in the Shire. So everyone can look at someone in Overwatch and get this general picture that the young people in any country on planet Earth can start being responsible with their neighbors. Even if the cast of Overwatch heroes was to simply spend a story fighting Omnic robots, I think that can be very exciting. I don't really know what Blizzard has up their sleeve, but this brings me to the point of this video, which is that if they put all their resources behind it, because they wanted to continue to illustrate heroic behavior in adult heroes that are from our own world, in a place where things aren't really necessarily dystopian, and everyone wants to return their world to the way it used to be, to a really peaceful state, instead of using the vernacular that they want to change their world. Then that would be a way that Blizzard could surprise me and other people in the Overwatch community. They've already done this a lot by having this story that doesn't really conform to what we're used to seeing from pop fiction. And yet, Overwatch is pop fiction. I'll mention the medium. I think it would be worth it to get an Overwatch movie out, even if the movie was a straight to DVD release. I, of course, would want the original voice actors to continue voice acting their respective heroes. I'd want the movie to be animated and not live action. Um, I don't think anything would be lost by doing that. I bring up the straight to DVD release because I know that the trend of video games being made into movies has not seen any critical success. I think the Overwatch community would get on the ball anyway and react to the fiction in a very bright way, even if it wasn't a theatrical release. A theatrical release? They could also do it as a series of rapidly released cinematic shorts. I It's problematic with the comics because we would lose the voice actors if this was delivered as a book or as a comic. And without the voice actors, we don't have the voices of the characters, so we lose a piece of the character's signature. And without that signature, we can't claim to have some connection with people from a vocation that has nothing to do with video games. Overwatch gains an enormous legitimacy from having voice actors who don't necessarily know much about video games and who in practice know very little about video games look at the story and say that it excites them very much. It would be redundant for me to remark on how the Overwatch community has embraced the voice actors. After a finished Overwatch story was released to the public, then I would have no objection to seeing resources that were diverted away from gameplay development put back into gameplay development. At least then, the really unambiguously successful part of the Overwatch endeavor, insofar as pushing this product to consumers is an endeavor, it would put that endeavor where it could influence young people the most, instead of dragging them through the video game part of Overwatch, which, as I've said, is something that I think is extraordinarily bizarre. I don't expect to have people in agreement with me. That having Blizzard become a animation company instead of a video game company for the first time in its lifetime is something it should do right now. But the least I can do is say that it's the right thing to do. If the worst I face is apathy about my assertion, then of course I should say such a thing. I think it would be a nice thing. This concludes this second video. The overall points I tried to make should be pretty clear.